Hey guys, welcome to Ghetto 5 World History.
Get away to Ace AP World History. So, you know the title actually says get a 5, but there is absolutely no guarantee you'll actually get a 5. This is only for any desperate children out there who slept through the year and really need to not fail that badly.
We will now officially begin the era of slacking, or in more professional terms, studying smart.
Glasses on.
Already.
To start off with, the beginning of the world began with the dark Paleolithic Age.
Essentially, the Paleolithic Age involved stone tools, like a sound effect.
This is not a
and
stone, close enough.
hunting gathering. During this time, fire was tamed, which allowed hunter-gatherers to protect themselves against the cold. But most importantly, we can now cook food, which, gave us more protein and all that, more nutrition. So yeah,
Better brains, basically.
yeah. So in 8000 BC, the Neolithic Revolution happened, which brought farming to Middle East. This led to a complete new era
With surplus.
Yeah.
So, because of surplus, there was a time where people had time to do more than just finding food, because agriculture basically gave you all the food you needed. So this caused more people to engage in romance, reproduce, and social discoveries. Basically, creating a social hierarchy.
Basically, just more bed work and all that. Yeah.
And social hierarchy. Okay, this occurred, and then population started arising. One thing to keep in mind is during the boost of agriculture, women began to have a less decrease in value.
Yeah, some sort of that.
Because they couldn't really do the farm work, but hashtag feminism 2016, we're not allowed to say that, but historical facts.
Yeah, just based on history. So after the Neolithic Revolution, it followed up with the Bronze Age in 3000 BCE. Yeah, Bronze 5, yeah. So, and eventually led to the development of metal tools and weapons.
So, the Neolithic Revolution started in the Middle East. However, it also arose in many other places, but we're going to start with Mesopotamia. So let's look at the first civilization. This is the Sumerians. The Sumerians were the first early civilization, and they lived in the Middle East or Mesopotamia, and they mainly relied on the Tigris River
And the Euphrates River.
So they created a strong social hierarchy with the kings and priests on top and the slaves and serfs and peasants at the bottom, like always. And in addition, they had a strong irrigation system. Since both the Tigris and Euphrates were really strong rivers, they had a strong flow. They had to tame the water, basically.
And they also developed a polytheistic religion, and each village had their own god and goddesses. And with this religion developed, ziggurats were also created for those people, those Sumerians, to have human sacrifice and worship their gods. Most importantly, the contribution of Sumerian was the Hammurabi's Code and cuneiform. So Hammurabi's Code was written by Hammurabi, one of the kings of the Babylonian Empire, and was the first set of laws created in human history. And cuneiform was the first form of writing that was discovered in human history, and it was created by the Sumerians. So
something to keep in mind is history refers to a term where we actually have written documents. Prehistory is the hunter and gatherers with the rocks and fossils and all that. So this was the beginning of history.
Alright, so next we're gonna talk about the Egyptians. So much like the Sumerians, they based off their civilization off a river, which is the Nile River. And they depended on the Nile River for the systematic flooding, which allowed them to have easy agriculture.
So there are three parts of the Egyptian Empire: the Old, the Middle, and the New, which took a span from around 3000 BCE to 332 BCE, which is a very, 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 very,
yeah, it was
very
2000
long time.
Wait, I got math. 2,600.
Oh, anyways, when we think of Egypt, we think of King Tut, who basically didn't do anything. He just died last. So yeah,
let's see it in action.
Pyramids and noseless creatures.
Yeah, B.C.E.
Voldemort. No, I'm talking about the Sphinx. Alright, but everything we mentioned has to be credited to the Nile River because of the Nile River, agriculture was a piece of cake. All the Egyptians did was they threw seeds in the soil and then boom, lots of agriculture, everything was good. So compared to other river civilizations, the Nile was really easily tamed because it was a consistent calm flow uphill, up the African continent with little to no irrigation needed to control it. However, they did have this irrigation system where they basically dug a bunch of holes on the side, and it was called basin irrigations, and they had their crops over there.
Yeah, so basically, the Nile helped the Egyptians gain a lot of surplus with barely any work because it's really easy for them to farm, and it gave them time and energy to build all those stuff, such as pyramids and all that sculptures and all that you see in Egypt in photos. So they also had two sets of writing, and since one were really confusing people, they created the so they created two sets of writing since one isn't enough to confuse people, and they were the hieroglyphs that made for holy purposes and the demotic script for
Everything else, basically.
Just like people that aren't cool
So,
enough.
as we mentioned earlier with the early civilizations, a lot of surplus means social structures.
Yeah.
So, the pyramids were built for pharaohs, but the workers who built them were peasants, serfs, indentured in government service, or slaves. So why would someone want to spend their lives building someone else's tomb?
Yeah, I wonder.
This brings us to religion and oppression, but religion. The Egyptians were very religious people who believed in supernatural shonen superpowers. Not Naruto, I meant just super elements. Yeah. And a polytheistic faith. So Ra was the sun god and the center. In the Middle Kingdom, he became Amun-Ra, which was a merge between Ra and Amun.
Basically, they just have a bunch of god and all that merging and all that.
Yeah. So they just merged the two favorite gods together, and boom, you got your favorite god, singular. And it was believed that pharaohs became gods after their death. So, of course, you want to please the gods. So people were willing to spend their whole lives building their tombs in order for them to be pleased after they died. So the gods would maintain cosmetic order. And also, basically, they oppressed everyone into doing it, whether or not they wanted to. So, yeah.
Yeah. So generally, the old Egypt became super rich, super rich, from now and until a series of drought came. This forced internal warfare in the old Egypt, which crumbled. Like the
London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down.
Anyways, the later Middle and New Egypt were quite similar to the old, except the Middle Ages were ruled by Nubia and became local conquests, while the New Egypt took things international and created a semi-empire structure, where they were eventually beat up by the Assyrians, Persians, Alexander, and the Romans. That's how you get up.
That's how you know you. So the next civilization we have was in India, the Indus River civilization, which took span from 3,300 BCE to 13,000 BCE. However, you don't have to really care about the date because they're just really old. So Indus River civilization had two major cities, the Harappa and the Mohenjo-Daro, and basically Indus River was only in cities. They didn't have a big structure like the Egyptians until classical age with the Mauryans and Gupta. So trade was conducted between these cities as well as other cities outside of the Indus River civilization as long as they could reach it through the river. So yeah.
Yeah, so in addition to that, they had the caste system, which was introduced by the Aryans, which were nomads who settled in India, and which at that time they established a religion, Hinduism. And the caste system basically created a social hierarchy in India. So at the most top, there are the Brahmins, or the priests, which represent the head of their god. Next are the warriors, which represent the shoulder. And then merchants and artisans, which represent the thighs. Yeah, you can't see it because, that's it. And then peasants were the feet. And lastly, untouchables, you can't touch them, so they're not on the body. Yeah.
Do you remember the kindergarten kid who used to sit beside you called Susie? and she once called you that you had the cooties, and like
I remember that. Oh my god.
That's basically the untouchables. Those are the kindergarten kids with the cooties. You just don't want to touch them.
Yeah.
Filthy.
Disgusting. Just kidding. No offense to untouchable, but you guys are cool, man.
Yeah, we love you.
So next we're gonna discuss about a controversial dynasty, which is called the Xia dynasty. And according to Chinese records, it was from 2000 BC to 1600 BCE, and it was said to be the first dynasty of China. However, there aren't a lot of physical evidence that supports this dynasty. So sometimes its dynasty is regarded as a myth. Thus, some historians believe that rather Shang dynasty, which is the next one I'm going to talk about, is the first Chinese dynasty. Seeing is believing.
So they don't see it, they don't believe it. So Shang dynasty, which started in 1600 BCE to 1046 BCE, was the second dynasty of China, or first if you aren't ethnically Chinese and you don't believe in Xia, basically. So first, second doesn't matter, but just remember on the test, it's probably first. This dynasty focused on feudal lords to govern its people, and the big difference is that later on during the classical eras, like with the Qing dynasty and the Han dynasty, it's all a centralized government. So this was like the only time China wasn't really under one central rule until they later on broke down.
Yeah, and so the first Chinese-like script was developed at that era, which is called the oracle bone script, and basically they get bones from like turtles and all that. Yeah, they burn it, and you'll have stuff on there that people would look at it and say, oh, this would happen in the future. I'm gonna write it down. Yeah. And most importantly, compared to other contemporary civilizations, they all developed along the river. And for Xia and Shang dynasty, they developed in the Huanghe River, which is at the
belly of China.
Yeah.
So the last early civilization we're going to talk about is the Olmecs, who were in Mexico. However, because of the geographic difference, they're a lot more modern than the other civilizations we talked about.
Yeah.
They came in from 1200 BCE to 400 BCE, which slightly overlaps with period 2, but since they're still part of period 1, we're just going to go with it. So the Olmecs were the last major early civilization.
Yeah, they were extremely important to the Americas because it was the first civilization in the Western Hemisphere, and it also involved in the building of the city called Tenochtitlan. And most importantly, they were the guys who made giant heads called the colossal heads.
But like they're usually overlooked and people don't know about them, so it's probably not going to be on the test. But since we're proud Americans and we believe that America is just as important as anywhere else, especially with European dominance and like Eurocentrism.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about them.
Yeah, learn your real history, man.
Real history. So these are all the major civilizations we'll talk about, the early civilizations. Next week we'll talk about period 2. It won't be us, but we're always gonna be with you.
Yeah. See you guys.
1, go!
What? But ancient Egyptian life was much less.
Much more.
Go!
Bye!